Welcome to the Tower Yoga Podcast, where we dive deep into the heart of yoga and community. Come along with us as we explore the transformative power of yoga, share insights, and inspire one another on this journey of life. I'm Kellee Williams, and I'm your host and the co-founder of Tower Yoga. Thank you for joining our yoga community. Welcome in, dear listeners, to another episode of the Tower Yoga Podcast. I'm really stoked to be here today with one of my friends and mentors, Matt Giordano. I am in his area, Connecticut. We're actually recording this from his home, so thank you for letting us use your home as a podcast recording studio today. Today's episode is all things advanced studies and 200-hour yoga teacher training with Tower Yoga anyways, and how we integrate the Chromatic School of Yoga, that method. So I would love to introduce everyone to Matt, if you didn't already know him, the founder of Chromatic Yoga, and hopefully we can expand a little bit deeper into what that means and why it matters so much to us. So welcome, Matt. Will you let us know a little bit about your background and how Chromatic Yoga, its origins, how it came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, and thanks for having me. And I'm excited to share about Chromatic Yoga with you all, and give you a little insight as to why it was created, and perhaps how it can benefit you as a practitioner or as a teacher. So again, my name is Matt. The Yogi Matt is what I go by, and for many years in my early career, I was teaching from what my teachers had taught me, which was a wide array of information. And, some teachers had some anatomy, some teachers had some philosophy. And so I was sharing that with my students. And I, as a practitioner, I was really attracted to all different types of yoga. And I knew that my students would also have a similar experience. But there was this desire as a student to find teachers that I felt were of a certain quality. I was always attracted to teachers that seemed to have organized classes. And by organized, I mean from the anatomical side or the physical practice, it felt like I was fully prepared as the class went along for whatever postures were coming up. My body wasn't caught off guard or by surprise as the class went along. And I always felt best physically in those classes. And I would seek out those types of teachers that would provide that experience. And I could tell the difference when I would go to certain classes. My body felt more prepared than others. And of course, at first, I wasn't sure if it was the teacher or if it was me. And then as I got more and more aware of my physical body and a greater understanding of anatomy, it became fairly obvious. And then the same was true for the mental, spiritual sides of the practice. I noticed that with some teachers, I felt as a student that these concepts and philosophical ideas would land hard in my heart and in my mind. From some teachers, and in others, it didn't land at all. It felt like there was a disconnect. And so the teacher in me started to observe what the difference was between those. And I started to see that there was an organization that was underlying these types of classes that felt really good physically, mentally, and emotionally. And perhaps, what I would call just maybe less organization or disorganization in other teachers. And when it came time for me to become a teacher trainer, and I started training 200-hour trainers, at the 200-hour level, I started training teachers. I wanted to support my trainees in becoming organized in the way that they presented the practice. And so therefore, as a teacher, I had to get better and better, of course, in my own practice of teaching. Mm-hmm. And that began the process of coming up with systems for myself that I then taught to others, which became the premise or the foundation of what Chromatic is today.
That's cool. It's quite the story. And then of course, I just from knowing you, I know your background started with in-person classes in Manhattan, and then you kind of got onto like the festival scene, and then that took you more international and teaching on like more of like a global scale rather than like just an in-house, not just, but an in-house studio teacher. And yeah, and now really I feel like you are a teacher's teacher. Not that people have to be yoga teachers in order to like really enjoy a class from you, but you really are. And that feels really good because as someone who has been teaching for a while, and I've come across a lot of teachers, a lot of styles that I like, but it can be a little disorienting because there's so many different methods and names and schools of thought. And while that's very freeing and liberating, and I love that, it feels cool to have like an organizing kind of system that has shared language and that kind of thing, and still tons of freedom within it, which we'll get more into about, what, again, getting deeper into like, what does chromatic mean? Right. So that ability to start laying down structures as a way to better facilitate other people to become teachers is so crucial because we need structures in order to get a grasp on how to create our classes. It's really really cool that you had this idea of like, yeah, I need to like create something that helps organize and has shared language, and that way it can grow beyond just like you being a really good teacher. It's gone from that to chromatic teachers that I've come across are really good teachers. And that is so cool. Another thing that I really like is I was teaching for a while before coming across acro yoga and even before doing an acro yoga teacher training. But one way that acro yoga really informed my teaching, because when you're teaching acro yoga, you're teaching skills to make, or really drills to make skills, and teaching very progressively to make that kind of practice accessible. For people who don't know, it's like the mixture of acrobatics and yoga, and you work with partners called a base, a flyer, and a spotter. Uh, but then I realized how much that was informing the way I was teaching my like regular yoga asana classes. And people would come to me and say, oh, there's like this way where I didn't even know like my body could do this, but you like got us to such a place that all of a sudden I realized I could do it. Like there were building blocks. And so there was things I was realizing was changing about my structure or the way that I was leading my classes. And people were saying that, but they couldn't really put like they couldn't pin it down on what was happening. I was like, yeah, I feel like I facilitated that, but I don't even know how to tell you how I did that. And then it was just cool doing your 300-hour, and all of a sudden I was like, here's the language. Here's the thing. So I don't know. I've always been curious because you've been teaching for a long time, and I don't know where like the overlap of acro yoga and your regular teaching asana like practice came in, but does that inform, like, did that help in any way inform chromatic yoga?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have a lot of influence as far as, so let's just pull back for a second. Chromatic yoga tries to honor each teacher's uniqueness and their authentic way of sharing, but it seeks to create a greater organization so that each teacher can be the best that they can be. And I think with the idea of organization, when I'm using this word a lot, more than normal today, but I think that really pairs well with what you just said about acro yoga. Acro yoga was a very organized way of teaching a practice that otherwise could really feel chaotic, because it is a higher risk practice and it involves more than two people. Typically it involves 3, 4, 5 people. And the more people you involve, the more organization is needed. Otherwise you have chaos. And also within acro yoga, there was a beautiful, Jason Niemer, the founder, always had these steps to get to something. And that's a huge foundation of what chromatic yoga is built upon, the steps to get somewhere. And that's where the name chromatic comes from, the chromatic music scale, which is the small interval steps, or small tones between the notes. In other words, you might be familiar with the major scale, which is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol. And the chromatic scale is the smaller steps between those notes. So it would be do, ra, re, mi, mi. So it's the tiny steps. And the idea of small steps was to try to help students in the process of kind of moving towards something that was difficult. We call that a peak posture. Or when I say peak pose, I don't mean that you got to chase some pose outside of yourself, but rather it's the culmination of what you are capable of from a joint perspective and a muscle perspective and a neurological perspective. So when you combine those three things, neurological wiring or proprioception, and that's knowing where your body is in space, with muscle strength and flexibility and joint articulation, you get postures or you get movements. So if we think of a peak posture as a movement or a static pose, or even just an idea or a place you want to be in life, moving towards that expanded state requires steps. And a lot of times we want to jump from where we are at now to the top of the staircase where we want to be. And the reality is we can't get there until we climb each step. And with chromatic yoga, I always wanted to make those steps as small as possible so that everybody in the room had greater access to that posture or that movement that we were doing. Or if as a chromatic coach, towards that goal that we have in life. And the idea always was built on this idea that like we could get anywhere we want to go. It's just a matter of how many steps do we need to take to get there, and are the steps too big and overwhelming, or can we make them small enough that it's accessible for everybody in the room or everybody that we're working with. And acro yoga was really good at that. Whether it was with handstand or partner acrobatic postures or movements. And so I definitely was very influenced by Jenny Sauerklein and Jason Niemer, the founders of Acro Yoga, who were always really good at creating those small steps. Additionally, Anusara Yoga was a big influence, especially in the beginning. I was heavily trained in Anusara, but I felt that the structure of Anusara was a little bit too rigid in that every teacher kind of had to teach like each other. So
Mm-hmm.
on the one end, what I love about that is you always know exactly what to expect when you go to Anusara class. No matter who the teacher is, they're always going to teach just like one another pretty much. And I wanted to create something that had a little more room for each individual person to express themselves, yet still maintained an expectation amongst students when they go to a teacher, they have a certain level of quality or they know that it's going to be a step-by-step approach. So chromatic yoga, like Anusara, has principles and whatnot and kind of structures that we operate within, but it has a more flexible way in which teachers can utilize those systems so that they can be more authentic. If someone wants to be more vinyasa like or more slow flow like or more alignment oriented or more or leaving out alignment in altogether and just focusing on the theme and philosophy, they have the freedom to do that. But the systems and the structures that underlie really good teaching are all in place for those teachers. Chromatic yoga was also built on things like Duolingo, which I felt was a really high quality learning platform because there's this idea of introduction of a new concept and then repetition of that new concept while adding new concepts on. And we call that in chromatic yoga, we call it layering. So every student has this feeling where they get a new concept, but then they get to repeat that concept. So if it's a muscle engagement, okay, first step is the teacher presents that muscle engagement and tries to find ways to get every student to feel it and then repeats it in a number of postures. We call that layering, or the idea is we create a through line so that throughout the whole class, you get to the end of the class, you go, that was the through line. That was the muscle engagement that I did the whole time. And all the while, there's new ideas or new concepts that are being layered into the class, but there's that one fundamental thing that has been driven through the experience. And, I think a little that's from Anusara, a little bit that's from Acro Yoga, and I definitely think a large amount of that philosophy of teaching and learning comes from the app Duolingo, in my experience. And at least I know I was really basing it on I spent a lot of time observing that app and trying to extract what they were doing. Why was it so effective? And then try to give that to yoga teachers to apply.
Whoa, I never knew that. I didn't hear that part before. Or maybe, I don't know. That's so cool though. And that totally makes sense. I'm familiar with that app. So I can totally see that. And then also, if people didn't know or you didn't catch that, the name is inspired by the like chromatic wheel, I guess you could call it, or
Yeah, chromatic color wheel and also the chromatic music scale. So in either way, like just talking about the small steps, between the bigger steps, and just
yes.
whether you want to think of that between the steps between each color being smaller, or the steps
Hmm.
between each tone or note being smaller, or the actions that we take towards achieving a posture in our body, or an act or a movement.
Yeah, like breaking the damn thing down. So Matt's also a
Yeah.
musician. So there's another thing it was pulled from. And so
Yeah.
this is really, really cool and really beautiful. And how I always describe chromatic to students is that it is not a style, because they're always like, what style is it? It's not a style, it's a structure, it's educational based. Whether that being like a thematic through line or a physical through line, there's going to be a huge takeaway at the end of class. And that takeaway is going to be like administered or presented or taught in a very methodical step by step approach. So, like little bite sized pieces throughout the entire thing. And then at the end, you'll walk away having known why you were there. You will have known what the intention or purpose was. You'll be able to, whether you like it or not, say, this is what went down and this is why it happened. So, and then I gave this in one of the chromatic kind of global meetings that we had not that long ago. But I've also told students that it's like if you're whitewater rafting and you're in the raft and you don't have a paddle and you're just having fun and you're having a great time and you're going down the river, that's freaking great. That's like what I would say, just be like a regular class that someone's guiding you on. And then chromatic takes the next level where it's like, hey, we're all in this together, but now you have a paddle and I am the trip leader, and I'm going to continually point out where the line in this river is that we're following. So you're aware of what line we're taking on the river, and you're paddling, and you're feeling you're part of not only just being in the boat and being like wee, but you're like one with what's happening. So, and I don't know why I thought of that. Maybe because I like to boat, but whenever I say that, people are like, "Whoa, cool!" Both are fun experiences. It just depends on like what you want. I tend to like to have everyone with me paddling if possible. So,
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that differentiates chromatic yoga from other brands of yoga. It's that we're honoring education at its highest. It's not just about, I'll take you along for a ride. That's part of it. Get in the car and let's have a good time. But I'm also going to teach you how to drive, and in stages, of course. So
mhm.
at the chromatic guide level, which is our 200-hour level, when you get certified within chromatic yoga, you can become a 200-hour guide. That means those teachers will be leading you through a class where you are guided through an experience, and it's maybe perhaps less educational, but it is still profound in your understanding of your body. So you gain awareness of your body through in a chromatic guide class. And then at the next level, when you become a chromatic certified teacher, if you're a student, you will feel the difference. A chromatic certified teacher will offer you a muscle engagement or a joint action throughout the whole class, which requires a greater participation on your part. So instead of just doing the poses that the teacher says, you're learning how to do those poses and what muscle in particular to engage that day. We focus on one muscle, or at most 2 to 3 in one
Mhm.
day. And throughout that class, you're going to be learning about this one area of your body, repeating it over and over again, and you get what I would call an educational experience, while also, of course, having that moving experience of the heart. So we're not trying to provide education in a way that is like, okay, get out your textbook and let's take notes, but rather within the physical mental and emotional experience that we all love, that parasympathetic stimulated release, and all the joy that comes with the practice, but at the same time leaving you with something that you can take with you after the class, that you say, oh, now I know how to do that in my body. Or if it's a philosophical idea, you're going to keep working that idea in your head and observe it in your daily life, so that each class you take carries with you for the rest of the day, the week, or the month. And, for me, when I've taken a really good class like that, sometimes it's, one verbal cue that a teacher gave me throughout that class is carried with me through a lifetime. Whereas in other classes I've taken where they're firing off a bunch of verbal, knee over the ankle, this over that, I don't take anything with me because there's too much that was thrown at me. That's like, when the classic alignment, nerd teacher would do that. And I was like that when I was younger. I would see everything like, oh, no, this toe and this knee and this, and I would say everything. And as a result, the students couldn't get anything because it was just too much fired at them. And then I would do the opposite, where I would say nothing. And people would then have, of course, the opposite experience. And I was like, is there a place in which I can provide students with alignment and without overwhelming them? And that's where we came up with this physical through line: focus on one action, drive it through the class. And if that's getting really good amongst the students, then we can add another one in as we're going along.
Yeah, and I love that because really, Matt, like that was me before doing the chromatic training, and I had done other 300 hours and that kind of stuff. And people, like, I took it always like as a compliment. People would be like, "You're the alignment queen, like you're cueing, like amazing." And then I'd be like, "Oh, like, yeah, like what was one cue that really stood out?" Just like out of curiosity. And they'd be like, "I don't even like remember what you said, but like in the moment, like you were just popping off." And a part of me was like, oh, cool. Like they must have just been really present. But then as I started working with simplifying my teaching style and being curious about what you were saying, because when you were first teaching about, yeah, like we really focus on one thing, but I'm like, but there's so many things going on. Like, how could we just leave all that out, But I'm like, I'm going to give this an honest try, this uh, idea. And then it's crazy because then I could ask people after class and be like, yeah, like what was like the takeaway, And they're like, press your heel down until you feel your glute engage. And I really felt my glute. And I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. So I don't know. I kind of took it as like a thing of pride for people to be like, gosh, you're just like that alignment, like, woo. But then I'm like, I'm still working on this, to be honest, but making my classes less about me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Nice.
and there was a point in which, I just prided myself on being the freaking alignment queen when really it's like, but no one was remembering everything and they couldn't like go and have that experience after class, like you just said, because they couldn't even like remember what I said.
Yeah, and I can relate
So
to that. And when I started teaching, I, as you could probably tell, part of my ego is wrapped around education, right? Because I've created a system that's around education. So there's a little indication that as who I am, there is usually a wound when we do something like this. So just to give you some insight, when I was younger, I had a very strong learning disability and I struggled to learn. So as a result, what I'm doing these days as a yoga teacher, fast forward many years, is I'm trying to create the easiest methodology or system for others to learn yoga quickly and effectively. So I, of course, as the part of me that's wounded is the part of me that couldn't learn as a young kid. And the way I'm healing that is trying to create the best environment for others to learn in the most easeful way possible. So that being said, when I was younger teaching yoga, I would really, instead of, finding a way to be the best I could be at delivering a powerful educational experience, what I would do is try to get the validation that I was intelligent. And so the way I would teach was I would teach with a lot of anatomical terms, or I would spend time explaining all the different things in the body. And then I would just try to get almost my subconscious, it wasn't on purpose, but my subconscious was trying to get the compliment like that I was intelligent or I was so smart. And what was happening was I was just throwing everything out there just to see like if anybody would be like, you're smart. And the reality is I would get the compliment all the time, but it wasn't serving people the way that, I feel it is now where I don't need I actually prefer the opposite. Nobody realizes that the system or the way that I'm teaching is providing them the experience. They just simply recognize, oh my God, I can do it now. Wow. And I know where my inner thighs are. Rather than thinking, oh, he's such an intelligent teacher, they're thinking, oh my gosh, I finally can access that pose, or I know where that muscle is, or I know how to do that movement in my body. So for me, that's, even a bigger compliment. And imagine what you just said. You can probably relate to that within this.
Yeah. And then they're thinking, not like, oh, she's so intelligent, right? Like, what an intelligent teacher. They're going, what an
Mm.
intelligent body I have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that.
Ah, I love that. That's so cool. And I like that I just want to bring it back a little bit to the, differentiation between the chromatic guide and then, stepping it up and going to the next level, because the advanced studies and the 200-hour chromatic yoga teacher training that Jameson and I will be offering come up in January. So some people won't be listening to this in real time. You could even be listening to it after the fact. But we will be putting these on at least once a year. The next one happens to be coming up at the top of this next year in January, and that will be at the guide level. So it's really setting the foundation. It's You can think of it as an introduction to the terminology and how to structure. You will definitely learn about how to focus on a target stretch or a target strength, but it's very, very accessible. So even the way that people are getting certified in the structure is, of course, following the structure very step by step, because we can't get to this like expert teacher level if that's like what we want to do someday all at once. And I find that now, after coming into this the fourth or fifth time of guiding a teacher training, the 200-hour level, people come in and they're like, oh, by the end of this 6 months or 3 months or however long the duration of training is like, I'm going to have to be an expert and know everything about pranayama and everything about meditation and everything about anatomy and all this kind of stuff. And so you can just take a big sigh if that's you, if you think like that's the kind of thing you're embarking on, if you've been contemplating doing a teacher training with us or anyone really, I would hope at a 200-hour level. That's not it. And I know when I took my first teacher training in 2010, I had been practicing religiously every single day, unless I was on my period, every single day, studying, not just doing asana, but all the philosophy. And I after 4 years, got to my first teacher training, and we just got like a few days in, and I was like, I don't know anything about yoga. Like, whoa. So, and then my teacher was like, yeah, like this is what a 200 hours about. It's like setting your foundation. Like, you got a lot more trainings after this to do, if you want to make it like a career, especially. And I was just like, oh, dang. Like, so we will be really setting a strong foundation, and you will get exposed, of course, to a lot, but 100% you will be able to learn how to structure a class, and you will get an intro to a lot of different things. And then I love the chromatic structure too, because it allows for that variation in between the steps or the tones or the colors. Some people gravitate towards meditation. Some people gravitate towards anatomy. Some people really gravitate towards the philosophy, like I do, although I've started to love anatomy more and more because it feels accessible, and I don't feel as ignorant around it. I feel more confident about it. And that's through allowing myself to take my time and to know I'm not going to know everything all at once. And I was someone who never thought I would be able to remember so much biomechanically. But here I am, and I'm confident enough to be like, hey, I don't know everything, but I know enough to share and teach really solid classes and start to help other people teach classes too. So it's like, I know enough, and it feels really good to be there. I'm going to continue on this journey. And I'm just so grateful for that. But yeah, that's what we are offering, and there's so much room to like grow from there. But it's been really cool to see what people have done the last couple of trainings of guiding the chromatic, specifically 200 hour, to see how so many people are teaching the structure that we taught them based on learning chromatic, and but to see it in their own unique styles, of course, styles of yoga, but approaches and methods, and it's really really cool. So if you're someone who's like, man, speaking of this word organization, I would love to have like a super strong blueprint of how to organize my instruction, my classes, but also I want the freedom to be who I am, and for things to feel in alignment with what's comfortable to me or what's just kind of natural to me. You aren't going to come out of this teacher training we're offering having to be a little copycat of Jameson or I. You probably don't want that anyways, but or Matt or anyone. You get to be completely you, but have the support of shared language and structure of not just like tower yoga. This is a tower yoga podcast. We're speaking primarily to our community, but if you're someone listening beyond that and you're not even part of our community, like that's the thing I love, is that Chromatic is bigger even than Fresno, than tower yoga. It's a global community. I can't even, like, how many chromatic teachers are there at this point or around?
Yeah, we have over 500, and that's across the world. And it's growing fast, which is
Mhm.
wonderful. And we have, that includes chromatic guides as well. And yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on your guide conversation at the 200-hour level, I think, my observation, I've taken a number of 200 hours I just kept taking a bunch of 200 hours when I was younger. And what I noticed was there was two types of 200 hours. One and was the majority, and still I believe is the majority of 200 hours out there, just is predominantly focused on providing people with a deeper practice. And I think that's great, but it is called a teacher training. And while most people perhaps do a teacher training not to become a teacher, I do find that is really important to feel confident by the end of the training in teaching. And whether you teach or not is not a big deal, but the teaching skills that you gain is the transformative power that yoga has. And through sharing, I always say this, like, if you ever read a book and you're like, "Oh cool, I really know this book," and you're just thinking it to yourself, and then you go to tell somebody about it, you start to realize, like, "Oh, I didn't really know. I have to go back and reread that." And that's the power of teaching. It's like when you think you know something and then you go to share it and you go, "Oh, wait, maybe I don't know that." That's what a 200-hour training provides you with, is that understanding of how much you don't know so that you can go back, refine. The process happens like that so that you get better and better at your personal practice through the sharing as a teacher. And then as a result, you're also gaining the skill of teaching. And I was very clear that after taking many 200-hour trainings, that when I created this chromatic guide training, was like, hey, we need to have a training that provides people with the ability to teach really well organized classes in a way that feels authentic to them and provides a powerful experience for their students. And so a lot of the things that
Mhm.
you will learn in, with Kellee and Jameson is how to deliver a class organizationally. We call that the structure, or we call that sequencing, how to verbally cue and lead people through postures, which winds up being really powerful for you as a practitioner, because then you start becoming your own guide and understanding, like, oh, I can lead myself through this posture in this way. And you start to look at things on a deeper level, both philosophically and physically speaking. So, yeah, definitely, if you are looking to become a teacher, or you're looking to develop a deeper practice, Chromatic Guide is, a way that you can go into it and knowing that you're going to come out feeling confident as a teacher, and of course advancing your your practice. And the other side of the equation that I saw a lot when I was younger, taking 200-hour trainings, was they kind of already expected that you were able to teach yoga, and just, instead of giving you skill sets to teach, they would give you the practice and then go, okay, now let's teach sun salutation A, without teaching you how to teach sun salutation A. They would just simply teach you sun salutation A and then go, okay, now your turn. You're like, okay, but I just practiced it. I didn't learn how to teach it. Those are two different
Mhm.
things. And so that's one of the highlights, I think, of the Chromatic Guide training. And I know you and Jameson are also very much on board with that concept. Like, let's not just teach how to do the pose or how to do sun A, but also teach you how to teach that thing so that you're actually getting the step-by-step skills there as well.
Yeah, I took my fair share of trainings and a couple 200s, and I had both of those experiences as well that you just talked about. And then on the other side of that, after opening the studio, we had a free class on the schedule. We still do for new or newish teachers to they can come and teach and help kind of develop their voice and maybe get some feedback from other teachers who participate. And then if there's people in the community who have a hard time accessing yoga or as much yoga as they would otherwise not be able to do, then they can come and take a free class. They're usually a little bit more forgiving with the new teachers forgetting sides and messing up names and stuff like that, because they're like, well, whatever. It's not like I paid my $25 or. So it works out, I think, for both people, and it's a beautiful exchange of energy. But I was like, some people, I was like, great. A lot of people, though, I'm like, you did a teacher training? Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
How? So make no mistake, like day one in teacher training, at least with Jameson and I, everyone does it a little different. You're practice teaching day one. And I don't care. I don't care if you are just going to teach no one, if you're like, I'm only going to teach my cat, or if you're like, I'm going to teach festivals, like everyone starts day one, and they're without putting that little bit of pressure or like rigor, right? Tapas fire on yourself without being called to the carpet to try to teach something. Really, we teach what we like most want to learn. And without having that, if you were just to be able to opt out and be like, oh no, I'm just going to step back and I'm not going to practice teach because I'm not going to teach, you're limiting your ability to, I think you could potentially be limiting your ability to let these concepts that you're learning sink in. Not to mention there's this other thing that's happening when you're developing your voice, you're being seen. A lot of people have a hard time with that, but want that more than anything, and there's like using your voice, and there's so much there that, yeah, like, even if you're not going to go and lead big groups, it's really, that is important piece to this puzzle. The other really funny thing is there have been some people in the past couple of trainings that have been like, oh yeah, I'm definitely not going to teach, but you're requiring us to practice. And they tried to like wiggle out of it, and we're like, no, like, that's great that you're never going to teach a day in your life. Please still teach your partner here. And then those people are the ones teaching and like started teaching right away. And there's like a couple of people who were like, I want to quit my job and become a full-time career yoga teacher. And they're like, fuck that shit. They're not, they're still deep into their practice. They might, teach their colleagues once a month or something, and they're happy with that. But they're like, yeah, no, I'm not going to go on this whole, it was maybe like a fantasy thing or something before. But yeah, I think to also put that on yourself before you embark at this 200-hour level, to be like, I am or I'm not, let's just go through the experience. And then you have the option at the end to decide what you want to do with that. But to cut yourself off and be like, I'm not going to teach right away, you never know who your future self's going to be. And you want to be able to have those choices. So that's been a really funny thing, especially the last couple of times. It's been pretty big with people who are like, I would never teach a day in my life, and they are. Or I'm
For
going to only
sure.
teach and I never want to do anything else, and they're not.
Yeah, and of course I have that with the online training as well. But everybody that comes in, I just assure them, like, it doesn't, you're called to do a training. It doesn't matter what's going to happen after this. What really matters is that you're going to learn a lot about your body. You're going to have some tools to deal with stress and feel better on a daily basis. And at the same time, by the end of the training, you'll feel confident and you'll have the skills to teach. Then you can decide. And that's with everything, right? Could you imagine like never learning how to cook and then someone being like, all right, so you're going to do a cooking training. So that means that by the end, you're going to be a top chef. I mean, that would be ridiculous. But instead, you learn the skill of cooking, and then you figure it out from there. If you want to just, you want to cook for your parents or your family or whatever, your friends, or if you want to be a top chef, the idea is you learn the skills, and it's the practice of learning one thing, anything that matters. And of course, the thing that is interesting to you, in this case, for many people, yoga, and the asana practice. And, the different aspects that we offer within the 200-hour training. Anyway, I find that it's just nice to know that the teaching aspect actually isn't on you as the student. That's up to us as leaders to make sure you feel really confident and comfortable. And I also, of course, every training, chromatic training I've ever led, the first day, you're always, even sometimes in the first moment, you always teach so that you're not like getting to the end of the training and being like, okay, now it's time to teach, and you feel overwhelmed. But instead, it's just part of what it is. I teach inhale, reach your arms up, exhale, forward fold. And then I say, okay, repeat exactly as I said. Inhale, reach the arms up. And then they go, inhale, reach the arms up. And I say, cool, do that again. Inhale, reach the arms up. Inhale, reach the arms up. Exhale, forward fold. Now say it in succession. Inhale, reach the arms up. Exhale forward, and then it just becomes a real simple, oh, this is how you teach yoga. It's this little step by step, so nobody gets overwhelmed. And I know you guys do that same thing. So
Mhm.
if there is a fear out there, just know that everything's done with compassion, and it's up to us to do it in a way that brings you along. All you need to do is come with your curiosity and desire to learn.
Exactly. Bite-sized pizzas. It's awesome. So yeah, as I said, we will be offering this advanced studies and 200-hour teacher training, chromatic, coming up this next January. And whether you, like we just said, want to deepen your practice or teach, come along for the ride. You will be practice teaching either way. um, and there's it's really cool because the in person, it's uh, 200 hours, and there's about 40 of those hours you'll be with Matt online, which is kind of nice because it makes it a little bit more accessible to be able to do some of the theory and some of the content you'll need to know for teacher training online. And then you get to learn from Matt, which is really, really cool if you haven't already. So Matt usually does, which, who knows how it's going to change in the future, but we've had him do a 20-hour anatomy portion and a 20-hour portion on the Yoga Sutras, which is really, really cool. And I think if you don't already follow Matt in Chromatic Yoga, if you've never taken one of his online immersions or anything like that, then it's a cool way to kind of get to know him. I love that they get that from you. And then the other 150 hours or so are in person practicing and doing immersive weekends. So it's spread out. And this year will be between January and April, I believe. So it's spread out over the course of that long. So it can fit into your life. I know a lot of people have families and work and other kind of responsibilities. So it's a way that can be more accessible rather than leaving for a month or sometimes even longer than that, depending on what their schedules are like. I've gone and done trainings where I've been gone for 30 something days, because there was days off and stuff like that. So, which was fun. And that's another way, but we're trying to fit this stuff in. And we will be having an info meeting in August as well, if you're listening to this in real time, August 2024. So please feel free to go to our website, poweryogafresno.com, and you can look into more details about teacher training. You can submit your application, which we'll review. You can also email us at hello@toweryogafresno.com with any questions if there was something that has come up that we haven't answered. Is there any kind of final thoughts, Matt, that you want to share about Chromatic? Is there anything you want to share about upcoming events from you? And also, like, where can people find you and all that good stuff?
Yeah, thanks. Well, of course, Chromatic Yoga, we have an Instagram. It's Chromatic Yoga. And my Instagram is the Yogi Matt with 2 T's in my name. Plenty of upcoming events. We have a chromatic global training that's happening in October if you're listening to this live, but there are always chromatic trainings and chromatic immersions that I'm offering around the world. And also there's online offerings as well if you're looking for that kind of thing. And if you're doing the 200-hour training, of course, you're going to be doing the 20-hour anatomy course. And there's various courses I have on the yogimat.com. But yeah, I would love to connect with you in person at some point, whether it's in Fresno or some other location on a retreat or whatever it might be. And should you take the dive into practicing more chromatic yoga, I'll be seeing you somewhere.
Yeah, I love it. So the reason why James and I are in Connecticut right now, Farron, the studio manager, was here, but she left and she's still actually trying to make her way home. Some crazy flights, but
Oh, no.
I know Matt's face is like, whoa. But we just got to do the Elements of Mastery immersion. It was a 3-day immersion in Connecticut, and it was so wonderful, so bonding for us, so great. It's really, I feel even more established in the structure and some of the concepts. And it's been really, really, really fun. So, yes. And then there were people at this immersion who had gone to a retreat in Spain with you not that long ago, and they all raved about it. So, definitely check out his offerings. And also, if you have any questions or you want, my personal recommendations, then you can always reach out to me and we can chat. You know me, I love chatting. So it's 444. I'm going to take that as a sign that we need to let you all go and that we need to go. But I just want to thank you, Matt, so much for your time, for your teaching, for your passion and enthusiasm. And it's one thing to kind of be curious and to be thinking about, could things be done in a way that could be helpful? And it's another thing to figure out how to actually present that and make it happen in the world. And I feel like you have good people around you that are helping that happen. And
People like you.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to share. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Yeah, thank you. And I encourage you, please, to, if this resonated, to give this episode a like. Please leave a review if you have something to share. And we will hopefully be seeing you for teacher training very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks again for listening in and joining our yoga community. If it so resonates, please share this episode with a friend. Remember, the inner light of awareness within me honors the inner light of awareness within you. Until next time, stay grounded, stay present, and keep flowing with grace.